Had an interesting experience this year. Got an email from Google back in January um, informing me of my timeline update. Of course, I didn't know what timeline was. Still kind of fuzzy, but to my shock, when I followed the link, I found that Google had recorded my location every day of 2019, and that if I picked a random day in of the year, say April 1st, April Fool's Day, I could review everywhere I had been. Oh, actually, not. Oh, well, no April 1st. How about April 23rd? Okay, April 23rd, it didn't really do much. I don't know why I'm giving this information to you, but I trust you, students. I trust you. Um, Apparently, that day I went to Temple, where I also teach. Geez, I was at Temple for an hour and a half. Okay, well, didn't do much that day, but at least I got out of the house. Um, Amazing. I mean, truly, truly amazing. Where was I on June 21st? I was in Sea Isle City, New Jersey. I went to Primo's Hoagies. I mean, crazy, right? And here are some pictures I took that day. So it obviously I'm within the Google ecosystem, I guess you call it, or could call it, of an Android phone, and use a Chromebook. Pretty much only use the Google browser, Gmail, Google Docs, the whole thing, photos. Incredibly, I suppose, useful thing for me as a person, and interesting. Um, I don't know why I'm showing you this, but in August, took what for me was a very big trip with my wife to London, and I think this is the day we went to Cambridge. Yeah, I mean, so pictures of we did when we were in Cambridge, visiting all the wonderful colleges there, and I had my whole trip for every day. I know exactly where I went every day um, of that trip. I mean, not just locations. I mean, but pictures I took that day. Went to the National Gallery. I mean, incredible that I have this resource at my command, but incredibly frightening as well. I suppose anybody who has this service turned on, which is just for your knowledge, if you do use a Google phone or use an Android phone, I suppose we should call it. If your location tracking is on, if you want Google to know where you are, and certainly to take advantage of maps, I use the SEPTA app. Location history, yeah. You're receiving this email because you turned on location history, a Google account level setting, et cetera, et cetera. You can turn it off. I guess you can turn it off. Um, but so many of the services, apps, whatever that we use require, I'm just think of taking an Uber. I would suppose you have to have it on or something similar on in order to use that service. And I seriously thought turning it off when I got this email and realized that I had been tracked every moment that I had my cell phone with me of every day of the year, and I'm sure before that as well. I seriously thought about turning it off, and I'm still thinking about turning it off. Um, However, this is pretty cool. I mean, let's face it, it's pretty cool to have this sort of integrated record of your travels, what you did, every day of the year, especially if you go to a special place. Like for me, that was a special day, going to London. And, this is a completely effortless way of me having a record, a much more complete record than I could ever assemble myself, I suppose, without a tremendous amount of effort. I went to Buckingham Palace that day, to the National Gallery. I know what hotel I was at. I know where I ate dinner. We went over to King's College, which was to see a film, right? I mean, now I can sort of have a diary of my vacation in London. It's pretty amazing, and um, my Google Photos are integrated here, and so I have albums of different places that I visited: New York, Washington, London last year. That Google has really done this tremendous amount of assembly, and all automated, obviously, of my life. But I'm also being tracked. There's just no question about it. I'm being tracked, and so I have to ask myself whether I trust Google with that information, that extensive information about me. I don't know if I trust Google. I also don't know if I trust anybody who especially don't trust other actors that may have access to the information. I don't seriously think that the government has any interest in my whereabouts. I'm not an important person. Um, then again, I don't know if I'm an important person. I don't know. I just know that the potential is there. If somebody wanted to know where I was every day of my life, they could know. Google has the information. Google can prove pretty much where I was every moment of my life. And if anybody had an interest in me, for whatever reason, a criminal investigation, even a potential political um, thing of some sort, um, the information is there. And the question is just whether Google is willing to share it with them. I don't know under what circumstances they would. So this is just a personal thing. We're talking about surveillance, and I don't know what your settings are on your cell phone or other devices that enable you to be digitally tracked. I don't know. I guess everybody has their own sort of setup. I think I'm a typical person, and then I don't pay too much attention to what my settings are. And as far as location tracking, I suppose I'm typical in that I have it on because I find it useful. But there are these other things that come up. I had no idea before Google sent me that email that there was such a thing as timeline, and I suppose that's on me. But I think I'm typical in that respect. I just wanted to start with some very, trivial thing about my own experience, and as an entree to this subject we're talking about this week, which is surveillance and digital surveillance. I gave you this essay from the popular philosophy magazine, Philosophy Now, which is an interesting thing for the general public about philosophy, a very good magazine, on surveillance ethics. And this is from a UK, kind of a British perspective, where CCTV has been a thing, I think, that's been a part of their public consciousness longer than here in America. I don't know if that's because the UK closed circuit television, I think that's what it means, surveillance program for, I suppose, police agencies there is more well established than in America. I don't know. I think it is. But um, we have CCTV or surveillance cameras here as well, obviously. And he's not just talking about a British perspective. He's talking about any country in which cameras exist, which is, of course, one form of surveillance. The kind of surveillance, or at least the potential surveillance that I was talking about in my own case, obviously has to do with the kind of cell phone tracking surveillance, which it should be a matter of concern for everyone, whether it's really a threat, whether it's malicious, or whether it's is something bad, of course, is something to be discussed. But I suppose the really nitty-gritty, interesting issue that we're talking about this week in terms of surveillance ethics does have to do with cameras, does have to do with images. Of course, mine more has to do with location, but we're really talking about the kind of surveillance that has been enabled by information technology through the internet, and mostly through cell phones and cameras and social media and all sorts of use of images that we have. There's a tremendously new thing happening in the world in which there's a database, potential database of people's faces, which is, of course, enabled too by closed circuit television surveillance cameras. But crucially also, as we know from reading these articles, the kind of database that exists through the internet storing images of people's faces in this way that was never possible before. And that's been around for a long time, but what's really emerging now are computer programs that are able to analyze all of that data, all of that information, to organize it, to make it useful. I gave you two companies that are doing this. I'm sure there are many more companies that are doing this, but one is Amazon and its recognition program. And the other is this new company called Clearview AI, which is this very shady, I have to say, company that is doing things in a way that a big company like Amazon would be hesitant to do. Clearview AI is this company that's emerged very recently that is selling software to, from what I can see, American police departments to use facial recognition to solve crimes, I suppose is the idea. And this is the New York Times article having to do with that. What they've done, from what I can see, is they basically, as they say, scraped the internet for photos of people's faces in a way that's probably illegal. And again, this is why I don't think that such a database has been assembled by the big companies like Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Apple, whatever, who, of course, would have much greater resources to do this. This is a small startup company, well funded by Peter Thiel and others, which should sort of make you think. But in any case, they've scraped the internet. So they've created this huge database of billions of photos, and they've provided the means for searching them. That is, if you take as is well described here and in the other link on Clearview, if you take a picture of somebody, you can just run it through their database and look for matches, which is an incredible tool for recognition, facial recognition. That is, if you have a suspect, you don't have a name, but you do have a photo, there's a good chance that you'll be able to identify that person. There's the front man for it, Han Tun Tat. Very interesting figure, kind of mysterious figure. A lot of interesting people are involved in this Clearview AI thing. I mean, that's just a fact. This guy's a little shady in his background. Silicon Valley guy who's created some apps that were apparently phishing scams. He partnered with a former Rudolph Giuliani associate, and they're backed by Peter Thiel. So this is an interesting, I think, example. I've mentioned Google having a lot of information on me. If you look at the other program, the Amazon recognition program, we have an Amazon capability, facial recognition capability being marketed. And we ask ourselves whether we trust Google, whether we trust Amazon. I don't know what the answer to that is, but I can tell you that I do not trust Clearview AI. I think that is not a company that I would want to have my information with. Um, so it really is that sort of possibility that um, even if we did say we trusted Google and Amazon, even if we did trust the federal government, if you're going to go that far, do we trust local police departments? Do we trust a kind of a secretive, shady company that is working with them on artificial, facial recognition? I don't know. But if you get, the basics here in this essay, this Philosophy Now essay, I think are, really laid out. Surveillance ethics. That is, we have a situation in which, there's, well, this famous, it was come up again later in the course, but this famous example of Bentham's panopticon. His idea for a prison in which everyone would be under surveillance all the time, or at least potentially under surveillance. The key is in this setup is that the prisoners don't know whether they're being watched all the time. They could be or they could not, but they don't know. So there's this asymmetry that's being talked about by the author. The panopticon has become a famous example of the threat of surveillance. It was really made made a theme by Michel Foucault back in the 70s in Discipline and Punish. And the fear has been always that this will become a society-wide surveillance in which we are the prisoners basically all the time, in the sense that we don't know if we're being directly surveilled, but the possibility is there. Why is that a bad thing? Well, as is mentioned several times by the author of this essay, that it would have a chilling effect, that just the very idea that we could be under surveillance will have an effect on our behaviors. Now that I know that as long as I have that location tracking turned on my phone, that Google knows everywhere that I go, not just towns, places, countries, but businesses, of course. It can tell me I've looked through it, and it can tell me the places that I've been. So there's a record of all the businesses and all the locations that I go to. I mean, they're delis and used bookstores, I'll tell you, in my case, are the winners, and college campuses. But what if I went to a place that I wasn't too proud of, or that I didn't want people to know about? Well, I suppose I should turn off location tracking, but who does that? I mean, temporarily turn it off, but basically my life is now an open book. So will that have an effect on my behavior? If there is a place that I'm thinking of going that I don't want other people to know for any reason that I'm going to, and I know that there's this record, will that prevent me from going to that place? And that's a huge line to cross. It's a huge line to cross, this idea that my behavior, how I live my life, may in some way or another be restrained, affected by my knowledge that other people will have a record of what I've done.